remember we started doing those experiential learning days, eh? Like that was,
Oh yeah, yeah,
those are so neat.
yeah. I just remember blindfolding kids and leading them out into the forest, and then having them find their way back. And they were like, "This is awesome." I'm like, "I
Yeah,
didn't do anything."
yeah.
Just for the people listening, it's like Marshall Corbett is a teacher. Although you're going to give a little more details on your title here in a sec, but he and I taught together when we both lived in Jasper, Alberta. Marshall was the shop teacher primarily, although I think you ended up teaching a few odds and ends along with that,
Yeah, I was
if
doing
I'm not mistaken.
some PE and then a little bit of math science at the time and some careers and
Yeah,
stuff. But yeah, towards the end it was just PE and shop.
yeah, and you really can't escape Jasper and not kind of love the outdoors in some way, like love, have a love for the outdoors, because Jasper's so gorgeous and has so many places to explore. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful place. So that's the context for how I know Marshall. Now that was like, ooh, we left in 2018.
Yeah, I
Since
left in
then,
2017, so it was
yeah,
7 years ago. Yeah.
yeah. So that's right. You left the year before we left. Since then, this is the part where like I know a little bit of your title, but I don't know the exact details. So tell me what your title is and what you're doing now, or what that journey's been like.
So when I came to Kelowna, I ended up teaching some metal shop, which was definitely out of my comfort zone. I've only kind of mainly done woodwork, and I'll maybe start there because it kind of ties in really nicely to where I ended up with my kind of teaching philosophy. Now, the metalwork class was grade 9 to 12 in the same shop with art metal and metalwork all together. Multiple teachers had been through there in the past 2 years, and was kind of a little bit of a disaster of a shop. And I got in there and didn't really know what to do, so I just sort of said, well, I'm just going to learn this along with the kids. And my first project, instead of trying to have a project for grade 9, one for grade 10, one for grade 11, one for grade 12, I just said, let's do their safety. Let's look at a couple different techniques and then design and build me a place to hang my coat. That just opened it up for pretty much just project-based learning, increased stuff where it was a couple kids brought in some horseshoes, a couple kids brought in some railway spikes they had. We threw them in the forge. A couple other guys got onto the welding, started bending some stuff, and just kind of took off from there. And it was really cool just to watch, just learning alongside them in the metal shop. We had all these resources, and the internet being a big part of it too. Just look stuff up, and we just went to town building stuff. Forgot about whatever specific prescribed learning outcomes or whatever you want to call those anchors are, and just learned how to metalwork. And I spent a year in a middle school after that doing a whole bunch of different stuff, including yearbook, which is way out of my comfort zone.
Oh,
Uh,
oh wow, you were doing
yeah,
yearbook? That's
yeah,
hilarious. Okay.
it was. I didn't
Yeah.
even know how to use the cameras. And so luckily the kids knew a little bit, and it was grade 9s doing the yearbooks. It wasn't even a high school. So that yearbook
That's
was not
hilarious.
as good as the one the year before. I'll say that. But and then I ended up at Rutland Senior Secondary teaching woodwork and a little bit of power tech, and they had this forestry program that's been there since the 80s. It was right across the hallway from me, and there's the one guy was retiring, the other guy that had taught had just retired a couple years before, and kind of a transition period. And I looked over there, and they're doing some arborist training, which I worked for an arborist company before. They're doing a whole bunch of outdoor environmental science. So I'm like, well, I got a diploma in environmental science, and kind of kept sticking my head in. And finally, the one guy's like, you should probably come do this. You should. We got 2 spots, and you should come teach at this. And it took a little convincing. I jumped in, and then I took that over in June of that year, and I've been doing that ever since. That's kind of my full-time gig now.
I have to give a side note here. So I graduated from Rutland Senior Secondary. I told you this earlier, and it was kind of a weird situation. So like, no one's gonna know who I was, right? No one's gonna ever watch this and go, "Oh, that's Nathan from No, they'll have no idea, because we moved there. I finished grade 11 in Victoria, and then we moved to Kelowna for my graduating year. So like, I remember like 2 or 3 people from the school, and there's no way they watch this podcast. So anyway, just a side note. I know the school that you're talking about. It was famous for fights, by the way, back then. I remember there was a fight in the main foyer just about every day.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds right. It's definitely is not like that anymore. There's not a lot of fights, but it's
hmm.
it's kind of they've embraced the grittiness of the area. It's kind of I guess, the little lower socioeconomic area of Kelowna. So there's the whole Rutland community has a straight out of Rutland stickers. They're made kind of in response to straight out of Compton, and it's got a really cool
That's
culture.
cool.
Our principals built that up. That we really value the diversity that's in our school now, and um, it's kind of like we're Rutland, and we know we're Rutland, and we're proud of the fact that we're Rutland. Of all the disc schools I've worked at in the district, it's definitely got the best culture. Like it's a pretty cool place now.
Yeah. Well, and I want to step in and really, it sounds like I didn't like my experience. I actually really enjoyed Rutland. I got some of the best grades I've ever had in my life. And I had to work for them. It wasn't like it was like free grades or anything. It was hard work, but yeah, great staff. Great. Even the kids it was just kind of, there was a weird little culture of, yeah, we have a fight all the time. And then they shake it off. And then, a couple days later, there's another fight. It was a bad place to be. It was a fun place to be.
Yeah. They call it, described it before as the pirate ship of the district, and I think that's really cool. So
I like
that. There's one district, one school in the district's kind of the flagship, and then there's another one that's the cruise ship, and we're the pirate ship. So
yeah, I can totally see somebody with like a Scottish accent. Yeah, this is Rutland.
Yeah, totally. So
yeah, okay. So you got involved in how you saw that program. Were they offering it to you, or what was your step into that?
There's one guy, another young guy, is actually a really good friend of mine. He was kind of teaching it, but he was sort of not super into it, and he was looking at doing some other career things. And he was taking a semester off, so they needed to fill. There's two positions. There's one guy that's full time, and then there's another guy that's half time. They're trying to fill the half-time position, and I kind of said, yeah, I guess I could probably do this, and I ended up going out there every second day for a semester. I mean, we're out there playing with chainsaws, hiking up and down the hills, doing all sorts of different forestry-related activities, and just watching the learning opportunities that kids had in this, and looking at kind of my experience that like I say, I've worked for an arborist company when I was younger for a little while, and the whole forestry's been part of my kind of growing up. It was always around, so it was kind of like, yeah, this should work.
The kids in this program, are they just learning forestry skills, or is there stuff that goes beyond just forestry?
The main goal is to try to give them a look at the industry. So today, for example, we went out and we were on a logging tour. So we watched a big logging operation. They're doing not clear cutting. They're doing we call it patch cutting. So they cut little patches and little trails in the forest. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like a checkerboard. Yeah, just kind of the opportunity arose at the right time, and kind of I'm a big believer in sort of right time, right place sort of things. And it's kind of interesting that everything that I've done, all my environmental science diploma that I thought I'd never use, ended up really fitting into it. We do all sorts of plant ID. So the forestry industry is kind of the idea. We give them a little snapshot of as many different things as we can. Mm-hmm. So after we did the logging tour today, we went out and we started measuring tree heights using clinometers and chains. Tomorrow we're going to do a traverse using compasses and a little bit of orienteering, that sort of stuff. I think a big piece of it too is just to give these kids learning in a different environment. We get a lot of kids that come in that don't like traditional school. They don't want to spend another year sitting in a classroom listening to a teacher talk about whatever it is they're talking about, and then write a test that really doesn't mean anything to them. Yeah. So this gives them a chance to come out and do some real, true, authentic learning, which is something I've always really believed in, is trying to get learning that actually makes sense. It drove me nuts sitting in a science class when I was in high school, and okay, we're going to do a chemistry lab, but this is exactly you're going to follow these exact instructions. You're going to do it exactly what we say. And I'm like, but you know what's going to happen. Teacher's like, yeah, and you should be able to predict what's going to happen. I'm like, well, that's not fun. That's boring. Yeah. I want to do something that's not predictable. What could potentially happen here that we don't know what's going to happen? Let's try and predict the results, and then let's hypothesize and let's go see it without knowing the exact result.
Yeah.
And then that's real science.
And I know that there's science teachers listening to this and going like, but we're trying so hard. And I do know a lot of science teachers that have bucked that trend quite a bit, that are,
yeah, for sure, are
working tirelessly to try and try and make science like a discovery opportunity as opposed to a you must learn this kind of thing. But
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, so this being able to be outside, I think is changes everything up because you can't predict what's going to happen because you're dealing with all these variables that I mean, today it was -10 outside and we're standing around watching this logging thing. It's like, okay, it's cold. I think putting kids in some sort of discomfortable area is sometimes not a terrible thing because they're learning even just, okay, well, this is cool, we're watching and I'm a little bit uncomfortable and can't complain about being uncomfortable because just got to get through it anyways. So yeah, you know, they're shaking around a little bit, but there wasn't a whole lot of like whining or anything, which is good.
What it sounds like is like there's the logging industry, which is sort of the target that you're shooting for, and then there's all these other skills that kind of come along with it that are
Yeah,
wrapped up into it, and they end up learning things that you don't necessarily put on the curriculum, or there's no skill for like stay warm.
yeah,
There's no like GLO that's like you must stay warm. But that's what I'm getting at is there's a certain amount of learning that's happening. I would argue what it sounds like a significant high amount of learning that's happening beyond this target of learn about the logging industry.
yeah, exactly. And that was just today. I mean, we do all sorts of like we'll do tree planting, firefighting, forest health, all like as many different things as we can, hoping something resonates with some kid in the class. I mean, you call it soft skills. I haven't yet found I'm looking for a better term than soft skills because I don't think they're soft at all. But that's, I think, is one of the most important things we're doing in education, regardless of what the curriculum is it's teaching kids those how to work, how to work for a full day, how to have communication skills, how to work as part of a team, how to be resilient, right? I mean, we pivot all the time when we have days of like, okay, well, here's our plan for today. We're going to go out and do tree heights. And then we see 3 eagles hanging around. It's like, okay, well, now let's actually talk about eagles and what the apex predator system is. Yesterday, we had a fur trapper come in and talk to us about environmental management from a fur trapper's perspective. Like lots of stuff, interesting things there too, that I didn't really know about. He says his most lucrative contracts aren't for running his trap line and getting furs. It's from taking care of like problem beavers and problem muskrats in dams and in marinas and stuff like that. You're not realizing the damage that they can do or the damage that a wolf can do to the ecosystems now. And seeing that is a piece of ecosystem management was a really interesting thing for me to learn yesterday too.
Do you have any Indigenous involvement with your programming? Is there a component of that makes part of that program?
I really, when I did my master's degree, was a heavy component was involved in First Peoples learning and First Peoples principles of learning, which I think we really try to hit those First Peoples principles of learning pretty hard with everything we're doing, because not only are good for the First Nations kids in our classes, I think they're just good for everybody. Almost principles of learning is what you could call them, because they're great for everyone. A lot of those are really big for us. We also have relationships with the different First Nations people that come out and do stuff with us. West Bank First Nations, we go out with their head of forestry and do a little tour through all of their forest management areas and kind of look at all the things they're doing and how they're managing their forests with logging and fire protection. I think a lot of it burned this year. I've been through that area a little bit. We're going to go tree plant there in April, and there's a bunch of stuff we're going to check out there. Another really cool thing we did last year that we're going to keep doing is there's one of our First Nations advocates at our school. She's from the Nishka band, and cedar bark weaving is a big part of her culture. And she wanted to get into that, so she asked if they knew any cedar around this area, which there is quite a bit. And so she talked to some of her band elders and about the proper ways to harvest cedar bark. And we actually went out and we harvested a whole bunch, and then she weaved it into a hat over the winter.
Oh, sweet.
So, yeah, that was a really cool day. Just you could really see how the what you do is you make a couple cuts into the tree, and then you just peel off a chunk of the bark, making sure you're not taking too much that's going to harm the tree. Then you've got to take the outer layer of the bark off with a knife. So you just sit in a circle, and it was really neat. Just the storytelling the kids started telling each other about just sitting there, because you're kind of doing busy handwork, right? But it's not really busy brain work. So the stories come out, and you can see how that's probably a really spiritual part of doing that. It was really neat.
I'm guessing like one of the benefits I've seen with kids in the outdoors right off the bat is the cell phones tend to not be a thing. Almost like
I don't even think about that, actually.
Yeah.
Like I honestly, like you mentioned that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. There really isn't. That isn't an issue. That really isn't. It's because that's how little I think of it. The only time they come out is when there's something really cool they want to take a picture or a video of.
Okay.
So, and
But they're not
that's
sitting on their phones hardly
no,
ever. Or,
no, even in our classroom, not very often when we're doing, because we've got a little shop and classroom that we kind of do some stuff and when we're doing our theory stuff. And yeah, the phones they're not an issue.
that's been my experience as well. When I work for a camp, I've been working for this camp for years. Well, Faces. I don't know if I ever told you about
Yeah, I
Faces.
remember. Yeah, I remember talking about faces
Yeah,
for sure.
I work for them now as a videographer. That's kind of my big job with them. I do a lot of their promotional stuff, and at Faces, we actually challenge the kids to just leave the phones behind. And there's always like one or two kids that try and sneak them in, and they're sitting on their phone at night. But by and large, kids just leave them, and for 6 days they haven't seen their phone. And by the end, they're just like they love it. Like they thought they were going to hate it, and then they suddenly they love it. They love that they didn't even notice it after a little while.
Yeah,
I worked with another camp with it was being taught by Blackfoot elders down here in southern Alberta. Like the kids could have their phones, but it was the same like you were talking about. It's kind of like you go, oh yeah, they weren't really on their phones. Like they were most of the time engaged. Even when we went indoors, they were engaged with each other, and they were taking in the experience and not wasting it. Yeah.
yeah. I actually found the one thing now thinking about it too. Kids are using their phones for this time of year. We're doing a lot of tree ID, and then once the plants start coming out in May, we do a lot of plant ID. And some of the plant snap type apps that are on your phone are pretty accurate now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I could say, yeah, you can't use those. You do it the traditional way with the old plant book that we use. I say, well, yeah, don't trust it entirely. Look at it and go, does this make sense? Like, look at the plant that comes out and read the information about it. Are the leaves the shape it says they are?
Mm-hmm.
Don't just trust it as a thing. And sometimes we found it like, yeah, it's actually pretty good. But a couple of years ago when they first started coming out, they were not very good. They were maybe getting the right plant family. But I mean,
Right.
if you get a carrot family and you're saying like, oh yeah, this is just giant hogsweed and it's spotted water hemlock, you're going to have a big issue if you're using that wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's a deadly poisonous plant. So it's
Yeah.
but that's learning that's authentic, because it's like, well, you don't want to make that mistake. And so I say, yeah, use those apps, use those things. And I've had kids do that, and even we'll be talking about something and some kid will fact check it on me and go, okay, here's the thing. It's like, oh, that was really helpful, instead of being like, you fact check me, like, how dare you? Like,
Yeah.
I think there's a big moment for me along that thing back in Jasper when I was teaching Science 7. We were talking about Mount St. Helens, and I said, yeah, the blast wave, if you actually go on Google Earth, you can see the all the trees still, all the matchsticks. It's like they all are laying down the same direction. And all of a sudden, I'm still talking about something, and there's this kid playing on his iPad. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, just give me a second, Squirt. I'm like, what do you just give you a second? I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, no, just a second. I'm like, whatever. And he pulls it up. He's gone on to Google Earth. And he's like, yeah, check it out. You're right. And here's it laying there. I'm going like, okay, actually, that was really cool. Now everyone can see that. Like, okay, guys, let's gather around. Let's pivot here. It gave some agency to that kid for him being able to take that ownership and say, hey, look what I can do.
Isn't it funny how that's we're as teachers, we're often conditioned to like look for that and go, that kid is not on task,
Yeah.
And there's a whole like how to help kids be on task, right? A whole system designed to kind of keep everyone looking the same and doing the same things. And then the reality is you get out there and it's all over the place. And by design, I would say, like, no two kids are the same, right? So the idea that they all have to be like, I told you that this is Mount St. Helens, and you're supposed to be just sitting straight in your desk and listening to me tell you that it's Mount St. Helens, when really, like, there's all these questions in their minds that they want to answer, and because they're so much they're younger than we are, they're going to go and find their own answers to these questions now. Yeah.
And I think that's changes our role from being, especially with the internet and especially now AI. How could you possibly know everything about the topic you're on? And they can fact check you in 2 seconds and find out if you're wrong. I think vulnerability comes into there a lot. And I tell my guys all the time, like, I don't know everything about the subject I'm talking about. There's a very good chance that you're going to find something that says I'm wrong. And if you do, awesome. You're not trying to prove me wrong. I go, sweet, I can learn along with you. And I think that embracing that vulnerability really it helps make those connections with kids. It shows that, hey, I'm learning alongside you. And since I've done that kind of mentality, I've had very few management issues. I mean, especially when I'm in the wood shop now, like I can't tell you the last time that I've like had a behavior issue. It's been years.
Hmm.
Forestry is a bit different because it's when we're out in the woods, I got the same kids every day, all day for a full year. And
Mm-hmm.
there's 14 of them. They're going to have some personality conflicts. And I think that's a big part of it too, is just learning how to work with personality conflicts that you're with every day is a good skill for these kids. And, a lot of them, I've had a lot of kids with quite a bit of trauma, and it's a different role from being the master of knowledge when you start looking at, okay, well, now I'm just going to try and help learn alongside you and help guide your learning. When you have those questions, I might not know the answers, but let's see where we can find them. And
Yeah.
if they have questions, if they bring me questions that I know the answer to, sometimes I'll lead them in the direction. I say, well, have you thought about this? Maybe try doing this instead. But I won't give you the
Well,
answer.
and especially when you're talking about nature, like when you talk about
Yeah.
nature, so unpredictable. Sure, like how to like identify a plant by the certain shape of the leaves, blah 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 blah. But are there going to be variants? Absolutely. Are there going to be like strange, anomalies and things like that's the nature of nature. It's unpredictable and
Yeah.
and somewhat random. And so the idea that you hold this knowledge is, you know, is bonkers if you think about it that way, right?
Well, and I think you're a more effective teacher when you don't know all the knowledge, but you know where to help them find it instead of,
Mm-hmm.
because it's too easy if you know the answer to just say, like, you get tired, you go, okay, here's the answer, because I don't have a, it's easier for me to just give you the answer than this to try and help you find it if I know it. But if I don't know it, then how could I possibly do that? In my first couple of years teaching this forestry thing, man, there was a lot
You
of
were a
stuff that I didn't
student.
know how to do. Yeah, and I'm starting to get to a point where I know a lot of stuff, but I certainly don't know even close to all of it. But I think when I get to that point where it's like, yeah, I do feel like I know too much, it's time to move on and do something else. For a lot of reasons, I think for myself, it's too, I'm going to get too comfortable. And when you're comfortable, you get complacent, and that's doing dangerous things is not good. And also, I think when I get too comfortable, I'm not going to be pushing the kids as much. And it's going to be better for them to have somebody who's a little bit uncomfortable, willing to learn alongside them for the next group.
No, that's a good. I like that approach. I think that's a solid way to approach that situation without trying to sound like you're the one who they have to look to ask questions. You're teaching them to ask the questions, really. I do have a question around, like, have you observed kids and heard kids discuss why they like the outdoor, like being in the outdoors as opposed to being in a classroom? Like, what are some of the things you've heard kids say or bring up that kind of confirms that?
We've got a little promo video. They talk about some of that stuff, and I always kind of get snippets when they talk to other people, come back and they say why they like it and stuff. I think one of the big things is the variety. It's different every day. Like they ask me quite often, what are we doing today? And I say the same thing we're doing every day, trying to take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little Pinky in the Brain reference. I don't know if you watched that as a kid. That was one of my favorite shows. But I've kind of thought about that a lot and really got into that deeper. And I think we are, in some ways, trying to take over their own, individual worlds every day when we're out there. So that's what we're trying to do and it's going to be something different every day. And sometimes I don't even necessarily know. We're going out to the woods and we're going to go for a hike and talk about geology, but whatever we see out there is going to be the teacher. The forest is the teacher. And we're just there to ask it questions and learn from it. A big part of it is they like the variety. I think they like the fact that they're outdoors, that they're moving around. They've got their hands and stuff. They get dirty. They come home smelling like a campfire almost every day. They get to play with chainsaws a little bit. They're climbing trees. Like, their big portion of our program is the arborist part of it. So on Thursday, we're actually going to go out and we're going to do some tree climbing. So they get to learn that part of stuff. They're playing with ropes. It's very tactile, and yet it's also very sciencey. One of the classes they get is environmental science, which is an academic science credit in BC. We do a couple cahoots. We do a little bit of labs and a little bit of paperwork labs, but there's no worksheets or quizzes or tests that actually count for marks. And I say at the end of it, like, we have to give a mark because the report card needs a mark, but I don't tabulate anything. We come up with that mark together, each student and myself and my teaching partner, and we have a conversation and basically say, how do you think you're doing? And we talk about that. And then at the very end of the conversation, we go, okay, so we got to throw some number at this. Where do you think you're at? And that's what goes on the report card for the number. But we downplay that because the report card is really irrelevant to anything other than if they're trying to go into university, which some of them are, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything. What means something is what did you learn today?
Mm-hmm.
How can you transfer that to something else in your life, which is our grade 9, K to 9 now in BC has gone to a 4-point system, which we had in Jasper for our 7s to 9s. And I think it's just far superior to having letter grades or a 100-point system. And what's the difference between 95 and 88?
Oh, so many conversations around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like those kinds of assessment, because I hate the word assessment. I always have, just because it feels like the playing field is still quite divided, despite it seems like a shift in education towards like what you're talking about, less categorizing and a little more generalizing. There's still people who are camped in and will not let go of, but percentages,
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, it's
but
what they know.
universities, et cetera, et cetera.
So yeah, the university thing, I think that's just there's 90 teachers in our school, and I've said this in a couple staff meetings, and I get glared at from some of these people. There are 11% of our students that go to university. There's more that go to post-secondary, go to colleges or trades and stuff like that. But just because that's not the term when they say, well, we're preparing them for university. They say, we're preparing them for university. They don't say we're preparing them for post-secondary. And I go, yeah, there's 11% of our students go to university. What about the other 89? What are we doing for them that's benefiting them? And really those 11%, I mean, even a lot of them could probably benefit from, some more authentic learning than trying to do the hunting the grades things. I mean, I'm sure you can think of a couple students you taught in Jasper. I'm definitely think of some of them too. That was, Mr. Corbett, you need to help me get my A. You need to tell me what I need to do to get an A, because I need to get an A so I can get into my next, I'm going to a private school and I need to get an A so I can get into private school. What do I need to get an A? And I'm like, well,
you need to help me get an A.
Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, so I'm going to give you a set of instructions and you're going to do the instructions exactly the way I say. Where would that exist in the real world? Well, you're not going to be a boss. You're going to be an employee that's being told what to do. So you want to be someone that's actually going to be thinking on your own and problem solving. You've got to do something more than just follow my instructions. And that's what our new BC curriculum there, the 4-point system, is extending, proficient, developing, and emerging. And there's a lot of talk around what is extending. Well, I mean, you might have 1 out of every 25 kids is extending because they're going beyond and above. If you're doing exactly what I told you to do, you are not extending, you are proficient. And if you're doing it very well, if you're getting kind of there, you're developing. If you're not doing much, well, maybe you're emerging. But to be extending, I can't tell you what that is. You got to figure that out. So,
yeah.
And I think that's awesome.
British Columbia is always, in my mind, I know that they don't rock the scores globally like Alberta does, but to me that doesn't mean anything. British Columbia has always had I remember going there and it was letter grades. I know that that's an older system, but Alberta's percentages still, right? At the end of the day, they want a percentage, and this idea of a percentage to me is always just baffling, because just like you said, that what's the difference between a 87 and an 89? There's nothing different between those two marks.
Well, you can structure your class to have, I've seen it. I remember seeing it in Jasper when I was there, that you had a class full of French immersion students, that every one of them is in grade 9 is a 4 on the 4-point system. And then when they got their French immersion, whatever that was, their grade 9 diploma exam, the average mark was like 52%. So something's not in line there, whether that means that the teacher just said, no, screw this, we're going to talk about something else, or something's out to lunch, but those don't align. Same thing with, you structure any class to have every kid doing well or every kid not doing well. It really depends what you're assessing. And even with the curriculum that's saying that this is what you're supposed to be assessing, that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to every teacher, and nor should it.
We're talking about assessment. I hate assessment. And
yeah, so do I, and I find myself all the time getting into it. But I think to know how to break the rules, you have to know the rules really well, is one thing. And then you can start breaking them. And I think I've really broke the rules on that one with the way I've been doing things. I don't assess when it comes right down to it. I even in woodworking, I don't mark the kids' projects anymore. Again, we have a reflection that they do, and they reflect on it, and then there we go. That's it. And I think that is authentic learning. Where as soon as you get rid of that, you start saying this. Like, I've had kids ask, "Do you want to mark my project?" I go, "No." Do you know what you did well? Okay, well, what would you do differently next time? What did you learn from this?
Mhm.
That's all the assessment you need. You don't need to put some stupid number on it. Let's just
Mhm.
let's authentically learn. And that I think is I think you have to have that kind of mention that let's just forget about marks entirely. We'll come up with that later, and then you're going to end up kids step out of that comfort zone of being there, and then they're ready to learn.
What are some of the other partners that are involved with your program? Because it's not just going to be you and a bunch of kids and hey,
Yeah.
look, there's a tree. Let me teach you about like yeah. Who are the partners that are involved with this?
Oh man. So that's a huge piece of it, and
Hmm.
I started actually before I even started this class. I was starting to do that in my science classes when I was at the one middle school and in my woodwork class, because I think to have authentic learning, a big piece of it is that you have to have community partners. You have to have engagement, because then it makes it real for kids when you're doing things with other people other than just teachers. But yeah, I started building those up, and I mean, COVID was, oh man, that hit hard, because we ended up not being able to go out with a lot of our community partners for a while and stuff. But coming out of that in the last 2 years, we have, like today, we were out with a logging company out of Penticton. It was set up through the Gorman brothers mill. We went and toured them the other day. Yesterday, we had one of my brother's best friends come in. He is a fur trapper. Tolko is a huge partner with us. They just gave us a truck last spring,
What's
which
that?
is
Sorry, what
awesome.
is that?
Tolko Industries, they're one of the biggest, they're one of the five big forestry companies in BC. So they're
Okay.
based in Vernon.
Okay.
And then probably about 3 or 4 different arborist companies that we work with. Um, electrical, yeah, Electrical Industry Training Institute. They do our arborist training. We go on tours to a heavy equipment operating school. Yeah, I could keep going. There's tons, and even just people that
Yeah.
I found on Facebook. I've reached out. Like there's one guy. He started doing chainsaw carving a couple years ago, and he
Oh
was
yeah.
selling his stuff on Facebook Marketplace. And I was like, okay, well, let's just take a little swing here. And I messaged him, said, hey, I teach a high school forestry class. Any chance you're interested in coming out for a day? And he's like, well, do you want a demo, or do you? And I'm like, well, yeah, a demo. We've all these kids have their chainsaw certificate. We've got 16 chainsaws. If you want to show them and teach them a little bit, we could. And since then, we bought a bunch of actual carving chainsaws. I didn't even know they were different at the time. And the
Oh
guys
yeah.
come out
I didn't know.
a couple
Yeah,
of
it's the
times.
first I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy it was probably one of my favorite days of my career. The first day he came out, it was amazing. He's so
Hmm.
good at it, and he was so good at teaching it.
Hmm.
And it's now, he says he loves doing it every year too. And the kids learn so much in just a couple hours. Like some of them, one kid carved an Ogopogo last year with this guy helping him. Like never carved anything before in his life, and it's just like,
Oh,
and it looked
cool.
pretty good. So it's really neat to be able to have these partnerships and someone come in. And I think to make those, I just reach out and see. And I mean, not everyone's is a home run. I've had a couple that have really bombed on me that have been
Hmm.
like, okay, we're leaving now. We're not staying here.
Hmm. Hmm.
And other ones, I'd say by and large, though, I just keep swinging, and sometimes we hit some home runs, and we've had some really good community engagement with that. Timber
Yeah.
cruising, firefighting. We've got a guy who comes in and does our S100 firefighter training, and
Oh
so
wow. So is that a
yeah,
certificate that they'll get for it, or how's that work? Yeah.
yeah. So that's a certificate, and then they can go work for a contract crew. Or actually, this week we're just trying to set something up and see if we can get a junior initial attack program going with the ministry.
Hmm.
So a couple of them can go and do that for the summer and actually work for the ministry. And as you've seen, and maybe you've paid any attention to the media in BC the last couple of
Well,
years,
I've driven past lots of those fires in BC. Yeah.
yeah, it's a big deal, and that's something that's I ended up 2021. I said, call me as the last resort if you can't find anybody, and yeah, I got called.
Yeah.
So I was out a couple times.
I
So
figured you were probably out during your summer break out fighting fires. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
What you're basically describing is this is the connection between, or at least this is an opportunity for kids to kind of bridge that gap between the outdoors. I've taught outdoor programs where we're learning, like you described them. I don't know if they're soft skills, but it's like orienteering and first aid and all the outdoor related kind of skills, which I describe as outdoor education. And then there's another level that I would describe as more outdoor learning, and that's
yeah,
just we're in the outdoors and we're learning stuff, but we're not learning skills. We're not learning how to survive, or we're just in the outdoors because it works as a good medium for teaching stuff. You know.
Yeah, so I got a really good story about that actually. We built the new school in Jasper. We were there the first year. You remember that was that little kind of outdoor classroom that was outside.
Yep.
Yeah. So as far as I know, not very many people use that. But I was like, well, I'm going to do this. And
I tried, but yeah, it was
yeah,
tough.
I've got a thought on that one. So come back to the outdoor classrooms in a
Okay.
minute. I got a good thought on that one too. But anyways, this I was out there and we are teaching plant physiology for a grade 7 food plants for food and fiber unit, right? One of the things I did before that, instead of having them draw a picture of a flower parts, which is a pretty traditional assignment, I went to the local flower store and said, hey, have you guys got any flowers that I can use for my science class? And
Yep.
I mean, the stamens on a lily and on tulips and stuff are huge. So it's like, it was perfect. So we're actually taking those apart and looking at them. And then we went outside and there was I'm pretty sure it was a mock orange tree outside that was just starting to bloom. And I went out there and we're all sitting around and talking about it. I'm saying, we were talking about pollinators. And I'm like, yeah, so they'll come out, like wave this in the air and the scent gets around there. And as I'm talking about this bee lands on the flower. And this grade 7 class, like, Mr. Corbett, look, it's happening. They're like, that bee's pollinating it. And it was like, there's no way that would have happened if I was inside. And I did not plan for that. It's like, okay, this is a cool moment that's out there because okay, let's just go with this. And I think outdoor learning, like you say, there's outdoor education, which you can even call outdoor recreation, maybe. But outdoor learning, I like how you said outdoor learning instead of outdoor education. When you go outside, and I think this is the big kind of reason a lot of teachers don't do this, because I think a lot of teachers want to go outside. So they plan their lesson and then they just go outside and they teach their same lesson. That doesn't work. You're in a different environment. You can't just go, okay, I don't have my chalkboard here or my whiteboard or my smartboard or whatever, but I'll just talk out there and the kids will listen. Well, no, they're going to get distracted because they get distracted inside. Now, all of a sudden, you get a whole bunch of stuff that you can see, a whole bunch of noises, sounds, things like that. So to have them focusing on you teaching a lesson outside, it's not going to work, especially if it's the same lesson that you're going to plan inside. So you have to have a different kind of almost mentality about it where it goes, let's talk a little bit inside about what we're going to see out there. And then let's just go out there and just observe and interact. Forget your objectives. Like you have them kind of in there a little bit, but it's just, let's go outside and just see what happens. When I was at KLO Middle School for a year teaching science, again, we had another environmental type unit. And a lot of teachers are building ecosystems in a jar, which is a great project. But we had a wetland. Like there's a little creek and wetland. They're like right in the school, like right outside. There's a creek running through the whole school property, a bunch of reeds and stuff. There's always ducks there. There was a muskrat in there. There was a heron that would come by. There was the turtle area. And there was one teacher that was really used this all the time. And then a lot of the other science teachers just didn't go outside. And I was like, we're spending this entire unit. We're going to spend at least 20 minutes of every class outside at the wetland, because when you talk about interactions in ecosystems, let's just go outside and see what we see.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, it's
I'm
right
sure
there.
These cool videos and whatever online, but it's literally, right over here.
Yeah, and yeah, some of the kids would play around, fool around. So it's like, yeah, well, they're getting outside. They haven't been outside all day. But I'd let them do that for like 10, 15 minutes. And then we'd see something, hey guys, someone saw this. Like, hey, what do we notice about here? How does this tie into what we were just talking about inside when we're talking about, food webs? What's happening there? Yeah. Okay, cool. Like is that a good thing? Is a bad thing? Invasive species. What's going to happen if a dog ran through here? And then you can start doing the scenarios, and they get, I find, far more engaged than if you're sitting in a classroom and 3 of them are looking at their phone going, oh, I'm just so bored, I don't want to be here. We talk about the same stuff. All of a sudden they can see it and they can touch it and they can smell it. When you say that outdoor learning, and looking at the classrooms, so I've seen several outdoor classrooms that have been built, and it's really exciting. A couple of people use them once or twice, and then they sit empty, especially in the winter. But
when we moved here to Lethbridge, I pushed hard to try and get some outdoor education classes that I could teach, because all my whole course load was all English, and I was like, I need something other than just English. I did get some classes, and I don't want to throw anything under the bus, because admin and teachers and everyone at the school that I taught at are good people. They really are. There was just my biggest beef with the whole thing was like, the classes are stinking huge, like 40 kids right in a class, and trying to like meet the needs of 40 kids is impossible, on any given day, just to get that out of the way. What I would do with my outdoor ed classes, and this was like pandemic, there was nothing I could do. Like I just felt like I'm not going to
Yeah,
like show pictures.
you're in full survival mode. So
You know, I would just give them activities that you like, go in your backyard, go walk down, you know, whatever. But once the pandemic started to come back, I was like, I mean, we can't go on field trips because field trips were still, you know, not allowed. I decided to just embrace, you know, whatever. Like I went and picked up a bunch of diamond willow sticks, and I had kids carving diamond willow sticks, you know, best thing ever. Like that was for some kids, it was just like, this is the best class. I just sit and carve. There was
yeah,
nothing else that they were doing other than stripping the bark off, sanding these willow sticks, you know, making them into something beautiful. And it wasn't outdoor education anymore. It was outdoor learning because we'd be outside. Sometimes it was cold. I'd always, with a class of 40, there was always like 4 girls. Can we just go inside? How long do we have to be? You know, and I always tell them ahead of time, hey, bring extra clothes, come prepared,
yeah.
da, 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 da. And they would always find reasons to go inside. Anyway, I'm starting to revisit all of my beefs with education. I don't want to go down that road. I want it to be positive.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But I
And
found that activity was, for the vast majority of kids, very cathartic, very real. You know, instead of talking about outdoor stuff, which was pretty much our only option to do, is sit in a classroom and talk about outdoors. And I could only do that for so long. There's only so many movies I can show about the outdoors before it just was like, I can't do this anymore. So I just decided we're going outside. We're lighting fires. You know, we had these little fire pits. We're setting up shelters. And it's just on the property because we weren't allowed to
yeah,
leave
we
the
light fires
property.
in our compound before we get our bus. Every year we get 2 weeks like that. And one day it's like, hey, light fires. As soon as they're big enough, they would stay on their own, put them out. So, but
Yeah.
get them going. So.
All things aside, all of the sorry, I'm like almost triggered by this because there's so many other things I'm not saying that I couldn't stand, and just the hoops I had to jump through to try and just to get that stuff. All that said and done, it still was a positive experience for the majority of kids that attended, and I don't know, I my approach to outdoors is always like, it's the best place you could possibly take a kid. And just like you said, it really has to be something you prep for, but you're not prepping for the same things you prep for in your regular class. You're not, you know, preparing your assessments. You're not preparing what you're going to teach kids. You're mostly preparing, how am I going to make sure that my students are supported in their explorations or the things that they're going to do outside.
It's always what can happen, and we go over that. You know, obviously safety is a big part of it, but it's just exploration. I mean, you know, today we were doing after the logging tour, we were doing tree heights, and it's just, you know, show them how to do it a couple times. Okay, guys, go do that and bring your stuff back to me. And it was cold out, so I made a fire, and I was standing by the fire the whole day. Come back and just check their paperwork out and just watching them go. And I mean, they're out there, and by and large, if they're entertained, they're interested in what they're doing, there's no problems with it. They're out there having fun and learning.
Yeah.
And I think I think a big piece of it is you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and comfortable with letting go of control a little bit, because I mean, control is an illusion. Nobody knows what's going to happen next anyways. When you're outside, if you're trying to control it, you're going to end up just driving yourself crazy. You can kind of steer it a bit, but you just got to trust that everything's gonna be okay, and take the precautions you need to take, and just be okay that learning's gonna happen, and it might not be exactly what you had expected. And I mean, we do a lot of check-ins with our students and say, hey, how's this working for you? I mean, I tell my classes right at the start, my job, I'm a public servant. I mean, who do I serve? I serve you guys. Maybe sometimes you don't necessarily know what it is you need, but if you find that what you're getting in my class is not what you need, and you're not enjoying this, and there's something wrong with it, come talk to me. Let's figure this out. And a lot of our stuff is student driven. I mean, we've got field trips that kids have brought us and say, hey, we should go here. And I go, actually, yeah, let's do that. Let's check that out. Let's go see if that's a good place. And, you know, or if you got something you think's really cool, let's look at that. We got the freedom to do that. My principal, we were talking about it the other day, all this sort of stuff. And talking about curriculum and what you have to cover and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I don't even know what the curriculum police wear. He's like, I've never seen them. So it's like, yeah, good point. Like, who's really checking in on that, right? So
Yeah, that's a great question for BC. I don't know who would be the one that's listening to this and going like, "Oh, that's me. Here I come." You
yeah,
know,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna come
um,
find me in the woods if you want.
I know in Alberta there's certain people that think they're the curriculum police, but I don't know if that's a real thing. There's only one time in my entire career when there was a potential threat that actually would be a thing, and it was like really early on, and I think it's because it was a carryover from the 90s, to be honest, and prior to that, there literally were people who audited your programs, that right, to like ensure that the assessments of the students were lining up, and that you and I don't know if that's still a thing. Yeah, I'm sure there's people out. Well, here I'm going to make this declaration. I'll bet you guarantee there are certain states in the United States, and I won't say which ones, where that's a thing, where
Yeah,
there
I'm
is
sure.
somebody who is a
Yes.
curriculum policeman who checks up and makes sure that the things all line up. It just blows my mind, by the way. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I know in BC our new curriculum is written in such a way that I mean you can, man, you can justify a lot of stuff that you're doing because it's
Mm,
very open. And
mm,
I mean, we're based on three core competencies now. It's kind of overlying everything. There's some curricular competencies in there, but it's all based on communication, personal social connections, and critical and creative thinking. They've caught up because I think the 4 point system. I mean, I saw that my first year teaching in Alberta, and when it came here, I was here, and people are like worried about it and stuff. And I'm like, oh no, guys, you like this? This is awesome. It's going to take you a year or
mm,
two to get comfortable with it, but it's so much better and it's so much
mm,
easier for you. So,
mm,
and
mm.
there are a lot of teachers that when that first came out, they've been worried about it because it's changing what they know, right? You know, like I say, even the people on the side, I think most teachers have the right, you know, they want to do the right things. And I think there's some amazing teachers I see that are doing some really really cool things all over the place. And it's just
Mhm.
like yeah, this is happening. We've got our district leadership team, instructional leadership team, they call themselves. We're recently, just in the last couple of months, setting up a high school kind of group that's doing all this really cool stuff and trying to get more and more people doing authentic learning in their classrooms and really innovative type programs and stuff. And we're finally, it's happened in pockets, and now it's starting to we're trying to bring that all together, which is, I just think, really neat to be able to see that, because it's, you can start sharing your connections, because like I say, it's like community connections is huge.
It's a big deal in your situation, but I would argue that it doesn't matter what you teach. That if you can establish those kind of community connections, that's like that's a massive draw for students. That there's, well, students, parents, the community itself, the connected, you get a community connected to the school, and that school is the best place anyone wants to be, right? You start branching out. I remember that stuff happening in Jasper, and it was just like, it was such a dream to have these connections from around the world, kids exploring certain things
Well,
and getting these people chiming in on their projects. I was like, yes.
Well, remember we started doing those experiential learning days, eh? Like that was,
Oh
I
yeah. Yeah.
those are so neat. Like just
Yeah.
the cool things that started coming in with those, like that was fun. That was, I'd say, my first step into that kind of
Yeah.
type of learning was, let's bring somebody in that's from the ski hill that knows about ski waxing and tuning, and we're just going to spend a day. That person will teach you guys about this, or you can sign up for well, there's one, that aromatherapy was huge, that
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then even like, even the one guy leading the Jasper history tour, there's kids that were interested in that too, and it's just showing
Yeah.
like, hey, this is all this different stuff that we're bringing in other people, or even just showing that hey, the one teacher that was a DJ, and showing the kids, hey, I'm not just a physics teacher, I can DJ too. You guys want to, let's, you're scratching on some turntables, let's see how this works, right?
Yeah. I just remember blindfolding kids and leading them out into the forest, and then having them find their way back, and they were like, "This is awesome." I'm like, I
Yeah.
didn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the coolest thing about it, is what you just said there, is I didn't do anything. Like a lot of times I think that I'm just providing opportunities. I'm not really doing anything. I'm not,
Hmm.
I'm not teaching you. I'm just giving you the chance to learn.
Hmm.
And, if you want to listen to me every now and again ramble on about something, right on. but let's go outside and learn. There's stuff
Yeah.
to check out here, and let's see what comes up.
Nature is a fantastic teacher, and it's a fantastic classroom manager. It's been an hour, so I like to try and keep these podcasts under an hour.
Yeah, perfect.
By the time it's edited, it'll be well under an hour. Don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really appreciate you doing this with me. You're one of the first persons that like, hey, I see you're doing. Count me in. You're like first person up to bat. I love it.
Yeah, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is exactly like. I mean, I'm writing about this right now. All this stuff. Like, I don't know if it's going to end up being a book or not, but like, I'm using AI as an assistant, man. I guess AI stuff's really cool. Like, I don't know how much you've gotten into that, but I'll put down some stuff and I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And then it spits out all these other ideas. But it's writing them. I said, write everything you write it in the style that I'm writing it. So, and it's so cool. It's like, okay, I'll just take a piece of that and I'll take a piece of this. And then, oh, that's a good thing. I'll elaborate on that you just said. Like it's like having an editor sitting right beside you the whole time. Pretty neat.
Yeah. It's both fascinating and scary. From an English teacher's perspective, I'm sort of glad I got out before that.
Well, yeah. And that's, I'm actually meeting tomorrow morning. There's a curricular leader group of about 20 teachers. And that's what we're talking about tomorrow morning is using that. I'd say it's pretty equally split in our school on people that are like absolutely like hate it. It's the worst thing. It's going to destroy humanity. And then there's a group of us that are getting into it and going like, guys, this is really cool. What we can do with it. Yeah, there's some problems, but it's here. Let's explore it because it's pretty cool. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to let you go. Thanks, Marshall, for being part of this. You're a good person, you're a good teacher. You're doing the right thing out there in Kelowna. I wish I was living in BC. Yeah, maybe someday.
Yeah. Right now. I love being home, man. This is it's been back for 7 years. It's great to be back, and I love my job. Like I say, it's pretty awesome being outside with kids every day. So can't complain at all. So thanks for having me on. This was fantastic. I love talking about this stuff. So
excellent. Okay, take care.
Yeah, thanks a lot.